Bolsking. Will the Texans protect the QB? It's been pretty clear what the Texans' approach is on the offensive line. Nick Caserio doubled down, reaffirmed the approach for the Houston Texans this week, not only with the way that he operated in the draft, but also something that he had to say about the offensive line when he was questioned about it on the Kay Adams show. Here's what the general manager for the Houston Texans had to say about the most discussed position group of the Houston Texans this offseason.
You're one of the few that's made a very astute observation, Kay, about the composition of that group right now. So I'd say we have a lot of players that have a lot of experience, not only in NFL, but in our system as well. So have some players that are tackle only, have some players that have experience playing tackle and guard, have some players that are guard only, have some players that can play all three inside positions. So we feel like there's going to be really good competition amongst that group. I think we have a lot of confidence in the players that are here. I'd say add an Ursary to that group. We feel as a player that's going to enhance that competition as well. As played a lot of football, brings a certain physicality and a mindset and a toughness to that. So we'll get the five best guys out there on the field, and we're going to have 8 at the game every week. But we feel that overall that's a pretty competitive group, and we feel like at some point it's all going to manifest itself, and there's an opportunity for us out there that we feel makes sense that we can add a player. We're never going to turn that down.
So running this through my Nick Caserio translator, there's a couple of things that I want to pick up on and talk about from what Nick Caserio had to say. First, he kind of hinted at the system, the type of offense that they're going to run when he said, we've had players that have been in our system, and there have been players that have played for Cole Popovich that are on the roster. There have been players that have been in New England when Nick Caley was there and Cole Popovich were there, the new offensive coordinator and a promoted offensive line coach. So you kind of got a little hint there. However, it's worth noting offshoot offenses from the McVay tree, like the Shanahan style, like what Kevin O'Connell runs in Minnesota. The Texans have players and experience in that system. So their system, while it could be leaning a little bit towards New England, it probably does have a little bit of flavor from that McVay style and what Nick Caley picked up for his couple of years in LA. That was the first thing, but really the big thing is the commitment to competition and depth on the offensive line. That's what the Texans have done this offseason. They got rid of the most notable offensive lineman on their team in Laramie Tunsil, also the best offensive lineman on their team, and they did not replace him with any star players. They did not replace him with any significantly well-known offensive linemen, and they really didn't pay that much to replace Laramie Tunsil. I say pay that much. Yes, Cam Robinson is making about $13 million for 1 year of work for the Houston Texans, but there are some teams that spent $70, $80 million on a guard in free agency. The Texans opted to not do that in free agency. Their free agent commitment at guard, $5 million 1 year in Laken Tomlinson. They also traded for Ed Ingram, who is a player that is on the final year of his rookie contract after a disappointing tenure with the Vikings. So the Texans were not going to have any big notable names on this offensive line. They weren't going to have any big expensive commitment. They instead went with options. They have lots of options. You heard Caserio talk about it there, mixing and matching. Options is what the Houston Texans have. They've got a couple of different options for basically every position. For instance, left tackle. Well, Cam Robinson, I feel like he's going to get the first crack at that thing, but he's an option. Rookie Ariante Ursary that they drafted in the second round out of Minnesota, that's an option for left tackle. Titus Howard is a left tackle option. Is it out of the question that Blake Fisher could play left tackle? Austin Deculus was added late in the 2024 season and given a contract for 2025. Deculus is an option for left tackle should they need to call on him, which they did early on in the season in 2023, and he actually played pretty darn well out there at left tackle. The Texans won that game when Tunsil wasn't available. Then at left guard, well, I mentioned Laken Tomlinson. They've also got Titus Howard. Juice Scruggs could play left guard. Jared Patterson got a crack at left guard there in the regular season when the team benched Kenyon Green before Patterson suffered a concussion. They've got options at center. Juice Scruggs, Jared Patterson. They signed an undrafted free agent from Kentucky who is a big-time athlete, and Eli Cox. That's a player. That's an option there. Right guard, well, if you're an option at left guard, you're probably an option at right guard as well. So we mentioned Ed Ingram, but Titus Howard, Juice Scruggs, maybe Jared Patterson. You've got Ladarius Henderson, who is a rookie that didn't play at all last year. He's on the non-football injury list for the duration of the year. He actually got a question asked from Kay Adams to Nick Caserio. Caserio gave Henderson a glowing review and said that had he not been injured last year, he'd have been in the mix for the Texans in their offensive line situation. Then over at right tackle, hey, Trent Brown is a backup option to Blake Fisher. Titus Howard could still play tackle. You get here, and there's some names I haven't mentioned, some other guys on the depth chart, but you understand what I'm getting at here. They've got options. They've went down that road, and they have depth, they have options, and they're going to have a lot of competition in training camp. They entered 2024's training camp 5 unquestioned starters, it felt like. It felt like Laramie Tunsil and Titus Howard were the tackles. It felt like Kenyon Green and Juice Scruggs were left guard and center, and Shaq Mason was the right guard for the Texans. There was not a lot of competition for those spots. In fact, it took Kenyon Green forever to get benched by the Houston Texans. They never even actually benched Shaq Mason. The only time he didn't play was when Shaq Mason was hurt. And then as soon as he was healthy, he was back in the lineup. Competition's going to be good for this Texans team. Cam Robinson talked about it last week. He mentioned that competition is something that you can do in training camp that helps you get better, be better in the system. And it's the iron sharpens iron conversation that the Texans always have. But competition, options, and depth does not, let me try to make an equal sign, mean that the team is going to be good on the offensive line. They still have question marks on the interior of the offensive line. I feel okay about their tackle options. They've got players out there that can play tackle, and they've got other options if those players aren't good. Cam Robinson was not a slappy last year. He played a lot of football, both for the Jaguars and for the Vikings. He is a solid pass blocker. His run blocking needs a little bit of help, but he's a solid pass blocker. Options and depth does not equal being good on the offensive line. Okay, you'd rather just have 5 starters that you believed in and put those guys out there, not have to worry about it. The Texans didn't go down that road. And the main reason they didn't go down that road, why did I talk about all these offensive linemen and the situation, is because their belief is that their depth and their competition and the players that are not stars along their offensive line are going to be elevated by the team getting better on offense and having better coaching. The team should be better on offense because Nick Caley should be better than Bobby Slowick. That's certainly a hope. That's why the Texans hired Nick Caley at offensive coordinator. And a lot of the issues that the offense and the offensive line had last year were because of Bobby Slowick's scheme, system, and predictability. His inability to change created the opportunity for teams to take advantage of the Texans. And boy, take advantage did they last year. Nick Caley has to be much better than Bobby Slowick. That's one element of making the offensive line better. The blocking schemes that Nick Caley is going to install should be better for this team. And hopefully the offensive line will be better coached in 2025. Again, that's certainly something that the Houston Texans are betting on, promoting offensive line coach Cole Popovich from the assistant job to the O-line coach. Nick Caserio has been very clear that they like Cole Popovich. They'd had ideas about Popovich because he stayed in the building, declining to take better jobs, but stick around the Houston Texans. And I have to imagine, if you're Cole Popovich, you bided your time. You didn't ruffle any feathers, knowing that you would get an opportunity should the Texans fail on the offensive line in 2024. That's exactly what they did. Cole Popovich now gets that opportunity. Now, how good can a coach be in just one offseason in a new system with a bunch of new faces on the offensive line and a bunch of holdover players that, frankly, aren't very good right now? Now, have there been moments where Jared Patterson's been pretty good? Yeah. Same with Blake Fisher. He had a flash here or there, though he's got to be much better. There were a lot of other right tackles and tackles across the league that were rookies that played better than Fisher. Has there been a moment where Juice Scruggs has looked like a good interior offensive lineman? Sure, but Nick Caley, Cole Popovich, they've got to draw that out of these offensive linemen, or the conversation that Nick Caserio had about the way that they approach things, where they have a lot of options and they can mix and match and they can have depth. All of that will be useless if they don't find 5 guys that can go out there and just block a whole hell of a lot better, both in the rushing attack and especially in the passing attack, than they did last year. Now, you would think in those options, those numerous players, those nearly 20 bodies that they have on the offensive line, you'd think they have 5 guys that can go out there, operate, execute, and be a little bit better. And if they do, this team has some impressive offensive potential. They were, a little bit past the halfway point of total offense in the league. I think they were about the 21st scoring offense last year with all their offensive line problems. And they were one of the 3 or 4 worst offensive lines in all of football. If they were just the 20th best offensive line in football, they might make a significant jump on offense. It will be intriguing to see if this plan works, because the worst offensive line in football, the New England Patriots, they're not going with competition. They went out there, they got 2 new tackles, they got a new center, and they got 2 guards that were hurt last year that should be healthy this year, and those are their 5 guys. The Patriots, worst offensive line in football, they got their 5, no competition, they know who they're betting on. The Texans, it's April, nearly May. They don't know who they're betting on the offensive line. That's why the offseason, minicamp, OTAs, as well as training camp will be incredibly important for this offensive line. This won't be the first time. This won't be the last time I talk about the offensive line. It won't be the first time that I call into question their plan. Now, I don't see the vision. I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know that it's likely to work, but if it does, Nick Caserio, D'Amico Ryans, the whole decision-making situation, as well as the offensive coaches, especially Nick Caley and Cole Popovich, will deserve a lot of credit. And if it doesn't work and the Texans squander away a season because they can't protect their quarterback and they can't run the football consistently and effectively, well, we'll know where it all went wrong, which is just betting on competition and options over quality on the offensive line. Appreciate you watching the video. If you enjoyed it, why don't you head down, throw me a thumbs up on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and check out SNL Texans Talk with myself, Landry Locker, from the Locker Room as well. That's each and every weekday at 4 p.m. I said appreciate you watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Well, how about this? The slogan, the finisher. We always have it. I can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.